What's up, guys? In this video, I'm going to be talking about how atheists aren't honest with themselves and how their worldview is not consistent.
There's nothing more exhilarating than pointing out the shortcomings of others, is there?
Hello everyone, I'm Professor Plank. I respond to various theological and ideological questions and claims from a rationalistic and naturalistic approach in an effort to give and explain the opposite viewpoint and help to balance the conversation. Today we're going to be looking at a video from Seth, who's gotten a little steam recently with a video titled Atheists Aren't Honest with Themselves, where he's going to be looking down his nose at a group of people that he isn't a part of and doesn't fully understand the mindset of, and telling us all why our mindset is wrong. You know, as I've expressed many times on this channel before, I was a theist for 30 years, and it wasn't until I started critically examining my beliefs, when I started being really honest with myself, that I realized that I had no good reason to maintain my theism and became an atheist. And I think the same is true for a lot of atheists out there. In my interactions with other non-believers, I hear time and again stories of people raised religious and never questioning it until they decided to start getting really honest with themselves about what they believed and why, and then they realized that if they wanted to remain honest with themselves, they couldn't support and maintain a belief system and a worldview that was so flawed. But Seth here supposedly thinks that our attempt at living more honestly and authentically actually just dragged us into deeper self-deception, apparently. So let's dive in and hear how he's going to try to square that particular circle. But before we do, if you end up liking what you see in this video and would like to help out the channel, make sure you subscribe and click the bell so you'll always be notified when new content comes out. Check out my social media, including my Patreon and Twitter, all linked in the description. And of course, like this video, pop in a comment. All that goes a long way towards pleasing the YouTube algorithm, which, if we are being really honest with ourselves, is the only true higher power in all of our lives. May it keep my channel motoring along. Now on to today's video.
What's up, guys? In this video, I'm going to be talking about how atheists aren't honest with themselves and how their worldview is not consistent.
This is going to be one of those things that we have to keep harping on over and over until the inevitable heat death of the universe. Atheism is not a worldview. Seth, you're running close to disqualifying yourself from this conversation due to ignorance in your first 5 seconds. This is why I say that you don't understand atheism. And anyone who talks about the atheist worldview similarly doesn't understand what they're talking about. Theists addressing atheism always talk about the atheist worldview. And they do so because they're positioning atheism as the exact opposite of their theism. Which is true in a certain perspective, but they aren't looking at it from the proper perspective. Atheism is the opposite of theism the way that being a non-force wielder is the opposite of being a force wielder.
You don't believe in the Force, do you?
Kid, I've flown from one side of this galaxy to the other. I've seen a lot of strange stuff, but I've never seen anything to make me believe there's one all-powerful force controlling everything. There's no mystical energy field controls my destiny.
Unfortunately for people like Seth, they aren't thinking about them being opposites from the perspective of force versus non-force. They're thinking about theism and atheism like the light side and the dark side of the Force. They're the Jedi and we atheists are the Sith. That our atheism is a dark and destructive belief system that is antithetical to their own, but similar in its construction and framework, and its consistent, if flawed, system of beliefs. That it's a worldview, one that entails scientism and materialism and moral relativism. None of which is true, however, as atheism is nothing more than a single answer to a single question. Do you believe in any god or gods? No. It is impossible to construct a worldview from that single answer. So there are some atheists who are materialists, but there are some who believe in the metaphysical or the supernatural. They just don't believe that a god did it. There are atheists who appeal heavily to science, and there are also atheists who think scientists are frauds and liars and think all of modern science is a conspiracy of the global elites. There are atheists who believe in moral relativism, and there are ones who believe in objective morality just not an objective morality handed down from a god. The second you say atheist worldview, you are unknowingly calling out countless, totally different, competing, mutually exclusive, and contradictory worldviews that are held by various atheists that are all so different that practically nothing you are about to accuse the atheist worldview of can possibly apply to all of them. So you're just setting yourself up to be monumentally wrong and, at best, only addressing a certain subset of atheists based on worldviews that they have adopted that have nothing to do with their atheism, other than that those worldviews don't require a god as a central figure of them. Stop thinking of atheism as a belief system the same as any theistic belief. Saying atheism is a worldview is like saying turning off the TV is just another channel, or that being mute is an accent, or an empty bottle is a flavor of soda. Atheism is not a worldview. Atheists have worldviews, but they don't get them from their non-belief in God.
So let's get into it. So, on an atheistic worldview, there is no real meaning to life. There's no purpose to life. It's just complete nihilism because, we're just bags of meat. Something exploded 14, 15, however many billion years ago it was. And here we are now. And that just doesn't work.
So, nihilism, the stance that nothing matters, that life is ultimately meaningless, is not an intrinsic part of atheism. But more than that, I don't think atheism regularly leads to nihilism either. Well, to go back, for starters, I want to call out this whole line of argumentation because, Seth, you're positioning nihilism as inherently negative. Oh, atheism leads to nihilism, full stop, end of argument. As if nihilism were like your head just bursting into flames, like obviously it's bad, no need to explain it further. But nihilism isn't automatically bad or undesirable as a mindset. There is optimistic nihilism. Optimistic nihilism views the belief that there's no underlying meaning to life from a perspective of hope. It's not that we're doomed to live in a meaningless universe, it's that we get the chance to experience ourselves and the universe that we share. The optimistic nihilist looks at a world lacking meaning and purpose and sees the opportunity to create their own. So nihilism isn't automatically bad, but that's actually neither here nor there, because I don't think atheism leads to nihilism in the first place. While I have never been a nihilist, I actually had more nihilistic tendencies and thoughts when I was a theist than I've had since becoming an atheist. I mean, think about it. The general idea of most theists is that there's an eternal life waiting for them after this one ends, and that the only meaning to this life, really, at all, is just as a proving ground to amass enough cosmic brownie points to make it into the next world's good place.
Or...
Well, it's not the heaven or hell idea that you were raised on, but generally speaking, in the afterlife, there's a good place and there's a bad place. You're in the good place.
That's why a lot of the most fervent believers have a general mindset of keep your head down, don't do anything extravagant, keep toiling away, never doing anything that might be construed as bad by my religion, and keep putting every spare coin into the collection plate. Keep donating all of your time to polishing the pews at the church, etc. Don't live life to the fullest, don't get educated, don't travel, don't experience life, because it doesn't really matter anyway. The only thing that matters is getting to the good place. I mean, think of a rich person who has practically infinite wealth. Do you think they care what happens to a $5 bill in their pocket? I mean, a measly $5. Of course not. Hell, they light cigars with $1,000 bills and laugh about it. They have infinite dollars. What do they care how they spend $5? But someone with only $5, that $5 becomes immensely important. How they spend that $5 means the whole world to them. Similarly, what does someone who has infinity in front of them care how they spend a piddly little 80 years or so? I mean, it's nothing compared to the eternity stretched out in front of them. But a person who thinks that there is only this life, just that 80 years if they're lucky, for them, that 80 years is of immense importance. See, life becomes more meaningful the less of it there is. And that's relatively easy to see. It's in how a teenager who runs around doing daredevil-type stunts on their dirt bike or parkouring from one rooftop to another thinks that they're practically never going to die because they have so many years stretched out in front of them from their perspective. Versus a 70-year-old cancer patient watching the seconds tick off the clock and feeling the weight of their approaching demise. Life becomes more precious the less of it you have. So I say atheism leads naturally to finding life more meaningful, not less. Also, another little wrinkle, depending on a theist's particular belief system, that can further lead to feelings that life is less meaningful. An omniscient God who knows everything that will ever happen and has a grand plan that is unavoidable has provided humanity with only the illusion of free will. Knowing and setting the course of the future means that we are nothing more than characters in what is effectively a rerun. Every choice we make has already been determined, and we cannot deviate from that path. Ergo, nothing we do matters because it's effectively already been done, already been determined. The future is written, and we're just actors delivering lines from a script that's already been written. So, accept it. Just ride it out. And wait to turn to dust because it's effectively already happened. But outside of a belief of that kind of deity, your life is your own. Your choices are your own. May be determined by materialistic concerns, but certainly more under your control than the predetermined play written by a cosmic narcissist. I find everything in life much more meaningful not believing in a higher power than I ever did when I did believe in one. And I think the majority of non-believers would agree with that sentiment.
And then they still say that we can make up our own meaning. We can have subjective meaning. But that doesn't make any sense because a lot of these atheists, they say, we need to follow the evidence. We need to seek the truth. And I agree that we need to follow evidence and seek the truth. But they're saying that. And then they're not seeking the truth because they're not being honest with themselves. And they're saying, okay, we should just make up our own meaning to make ourselves feel better about life.
That made no sense. That seems like a theistic waffle where they just threw out some word salad without making any kind of salient point. Atheists say we need to follow the evidence, but then they don't, and they say that we should give our own lives meaning. How does the second statement contradict the first? How is applying your own meaning to life not following the evidence? If I say I really enjoy Reese's peanut butter cups, am I somehow not following the evidence and not appealing to what's true? If I say I find that painting beautiful, is that not following the evidence? I mean, you're talking about subjective meaning and then trying to say that because subjectivity does not conform with objectivity, then atheists shouldn't hold to it in any way. That's, frankly, some of the dumbest shit I've ever heard, and I don't think even you believe that that's a good argument, but that you were struggling to come up with a good argument and you just belched up that hot nonsense. Look, there are three types of propositions: propositions of fact, propositions of value, and propositions of policy. They cover totally different things, and they must be approached differently in construction as well. When atheists, or frankly when anyone whose epistemology is derived from empiricism, says something like, we need to follow the evidence, we're obviously talking about in regards to propositions of fact. Those would be things like, increased greenhouse gases related to human activity cause global warming. That is something that is either objectively true or not true, and we need to examine and follow the empirical evidence to find out that objective truth. Other things like what temperature water boils at, how fast the earth spins, how old the universe is, whether or not God exists, these are propositions of fact, and yes, we should follow the evidence to determine them. But questions of meaning? Good and bad, right and wrong, meaningful and meaningless, these are not things that are objectively true or false. Americans' disproportionately large amount of pollution relative to other countries is wrong is a value judgment. It's a proposition of value. Similarly, so is Reese's peanut butter cups are good. That painting is pretty. My life has deep meaning. These kinds of questions are not ones that can be answered through empirical evidence. And you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone, atheist included, who argues attempting to.
But that's not being honest with yourself, and that's not being truthful. We should be truthful. And the atheists that are truthful are the ones that admit that on their worldview, it's just complete nihilism, like Friedrich Nietzsche. At least Friedrich Nietzsche admitted that there is no objective meaning, there is no objective morality. We're just kind of just here, and it's completely meaningless. It's just a meaningless existence.
See, you even gave the qualifier that defeats your entire argument right there. You said there's no objective meaning. And then you're just jumping from, well, if atheists don't believe in objective meaning, then that means they must not believe in any meaning at all. Which is weird, given that you, less than a minute ago, said that atheists hold that meaning can be subjective and we can derive our meaning for ourselves. You can't admit to atheists believing in subjective meaning and then in the next breath insist that atheists don't believe in any meaning. This is especially frustrating considering that there is literally no such thing as objective meaning in the first place. Just like when the theistic notion of objective morality comes up, theists don't seem to understand what the words objective and subjective mean. Objective literally means expressing or dealing with facts or conditions as perceived without distortion by personal feelings, prejudices, or interpretations. What is meaning if it's not personal feelings, prejudice, or interpretations? Isn't something meaningful because you feel that it is? Because you interpret it as such? How can you have meaning without feeling, prejudice, or interpretation? Even if you were going to say that meaning is objective in the sense that it's handed down from on high by an all-powerful creator God, that still doesn't make it objective. It would still be subjectively meaningful, only now it's the creator God is the subject interpreting meaning based on that God's feelings, prejudices, or interpretations. When we say that there's no objective meaning, it's because it's not possible for meaning to be objective at all. Some subject has to be interpreting meaning in order for there to be meaning at all. And to a non-nihilistic atheist, we don't see any reason why that meaning can't come from ourselves instead of from some creator God. All meaning is subjective, period. It's just which meaning is more, well, meaningful to you. Meaning you derive on your own for yourself? Or meaning that is written in some holy book or delivered by some clergy member, supposedly on behalf of an unseen, unproven, undetermined, and ultimately assumed higher being.
And modern day atheists, a lot of atheists nowadays just kind of lie to themselves and tell themselves, oh no, it's okay, you know, we can make our own meaning, we can still have meaning, we can still live a good life, but we can still have hope for the future or whatever. But on your worldview, you can't, because there is nothing objective about life. Everything is subjective. There's nothing to live for, really.
Nothing new in that bit. You were just restating the same nonsense with the same flaw in reasoning as before. Oh, you don't think there's objective meaning? Therefore you can't think there's any meaning at all, because subjective meaning isn't real meaning. Therefore it doesn't count. No. Objective meaning is an oxymoron.
Hold up. You can't do that. That is a diss. I ain't no oxymoron, all right?
No, not oxymoron, schmuck. Oxymoron.
Since all meaning is subjective, there's no fallacy in atheists appealing to subjective meaning. Your whole argument is built on a fundamental misunderstanding of what words mean.
There isn't even any point to anything, really, because it's nothing, really. Everything has no purpose.
Your argument is nothing, really, and has no purpose. Can you stop just restating the same thing over and over and get on to another line of argumentation? I mean, geez, I wish people would script out their videos so they could avoid all of this pointless meandering. I mean, we aren't even halfway through the video, Seth. Tell me you have something else to move on to, and it's not going to be just 3 more minutes of this pointless repetition.
And they also say things like that one of the most common arguments for atheists is the argument of evil. And they say evil exists, therefore God isn't real, because why would God allow evil to happen? But they're assuming that there's a such thing as objective evil and objective good, and they have no way of proving that on their worldview.
No. The problem of evil does not assume the existence of objective evil. Frankly, the word evil in the problem of evil argument is little more than a convenient phrase that acts as a placeholder. Evil is a term everyone's familiar with, and everyone can wrap their head around it easily with just a single syllable. But it is a bit of a misnomer, because evil, typically, in its most common usage, means morally reprehensible, or arising from actual or imputed bad character or conduct. Basically, we most commonly think of evil as when someone does something malicious. Someone acts to intentionally do harm. That's how we tend to think of evil. But the problem of evil isn't just referencing when humans act maliciously. The problem of evil refers to anything that is considered harmful, causes unuseful pain or suffering, or anything one experiences that they might find disagreeable. This would include, for instance, things like diseases that cause great pain and or death, natural disasters that injure or destroy, suffering that seems to have no benefit, even tangentially. Now, even though these are aspects of the natural world that have no maliciousness or intention behind them at all, seems like they don't fall in line with how we normally think of evil, and thus, that's why it's a bit of a misnomer. But it actually is still in keeping with the definition of evil. Let's go back and look at it again. And what do we find in the second definition? Causing discomfort or repulsion, disagreeable, causing harm, marked by misfortune. So, children getting cancer is not arising from bad character or conduct, but it is certainly causing discomfort and is disagreeable. A natural disaster like a tornado may not be morally reprehensible, but it certainly causes harm and is marked by misfortune. So, when the problem of evil argument is being brought up, it's addressing all forms of evil, including ones that can be established objectively. A tornado objectively causes harm and destruction. Cancer objectively causes discomfort and is disagreeable to the afflicted person suffering from it. Sure, their experience itself may be subjective, but it is objectively true that they report it as painful and undesirable. So the problem of evil does not seek to establish a moral objective standard, but instead appeals to the objective truth of what people report as or experience as evil, much of which is objectively verifiable, like that a tornado knocked your house down and you didn't like it, and that if a loving God exists, he wouldn't have made a tornado knock your house down, because that wouldn't be very loving.
Alright, so that's the problem. Like, they say, oh, suffering is bad. Why is suffering bad? Who says it's bad?
The person who is experiencing it.
Why is suffering bad? And they say, okay, if things benefit society, it's good, and if it makes people suffer, it's bad. What is benefiting? What is beneficial? What is good? What is bad? They just go in circles, and they can't answer it. They can't answer what's good and bad.
Sure, you can answer it. It's just about getting more specific with your definitions. Nobody says, oh, if it benefits society, it's good, full stop, no more explanation. Obviously, then you have to explain what you mean by benefiting society. And that's not that hard to do. There are certain things that are generally agreed upon by all people to be desirable or undesirable. Things like continued living is considered better than dying. Pleasure is considered better than pain. Or even not having pain is considered better than having pain. Having the ability and opportunity to pursue personal desires is thought of as better than having obstacles and prohibitions placed upon you. Now, these things may all be rooted in subjective interpretation, but there are objectively proven ways to better obtain them. Better sanitation leads to fewer diseases, which is less pain and ultimately longer life expectancy. So, a society is benefited from having effective sanitation practices. Developing new technology to make necessary work easier, like having combines to harvest food quicker and more efficiently than people doing it by hand. This makes more plentiful food supplies with less onerous and pain-causing physical labor. So, a society is benefited from developing pain-reducing, workload-easing technologies, etc. What is suffering and what is beneficial is decided by the society as a whole, and differences and disagreements certainly arise, but that's the result of the subjective gray areas that we all live in every day. This is why philosophy exists. It's why we've been wrestling with ideas about what is truly good or bad for society for as long as society has existed, and will continue to do so for as long as we continue to exist. But the fact that we have to struggle with subjective interpretations of right and wrong is no reason to throw it all into the garbage dump and just appeal to some imagined magical being who's going to make it all easier and just tell us what we should and shouldn't be doing. The fact that subjectivity is complicated, and it would be so much easier if things were just objectively good and bad, doesn't make objective good and bad coherent ideas. Good and bad, right and wrong, beneficial and harmful to society are hard questions. They're questions rooted in subjectivity, and that's tough to parse out. But the fact that it's hard doesn't mean your God exists. It just means that you don't have the mental fortitude to deal with the difficulties of subjectivity and want to instead appeal to a fairy tale to tell you the right answer.
So that's the main problem with atheism. Their arguments are, they can't use moral arguments because they can't even prove that morality exists on their worldview.
Translation? They don't believe in objective morality, hence they can't believe in any morality, because if it's not God-derived, set in stone, objective moral standards, then it's not actually morality at all. Well, what about subjective morality, derived from common ethics within a society, that are constantly shifting and changing with the times and perspectives of the members of that society, carefully and unendingly co-constructed and co-negotiated by that society, prone to error, alteration, reinterpretation, and of course, disagreement, that won't ultimately work out for everyone all the time, but is the best effort of that society to make our shared collective existence as respectful and fulfilling as possible.
Because materialists, most of them are materialists, obviously. You can't get morality from just the physical, because morality is not a physical thing. It's not something that you can look at, you can see in a test tube. But they're materialists, they only believe in the physical.
Gross misunderstanding of materialism. Saying you can't get morality from materialism because morality is not a physical thing is like saying you can't get love from materialism because love's not a physical thing. Love is an emotion, and in the materialistic view, emotions come from and are produced by the brain. The brain is a physical thing, hence love is rooted in a physical, material producer. Similarly, morality is a framework of beliefs and perspectives. Beliefs and perspectives come from and are produced by the brain. Hence, morality is rooted in a physical, material producer. Geez, Seth, tell me you don't understand the entry-level basics of these concepts without telling me you don't understand the entry-level basics of these concepts.
But they believe in morality, and that's not a physical thing, so it's just completely inconsistent. They're stealing a worldview that would only make... They're stealing a theistic worldview while claiming to be just materialists.
Believing in non-materialistic morality is stealing from a theistic worldview? As if it's impossible to believe in metaphysically derived morality if you don't believe it was created by a god? I think the Buddhists might have something to say about that. Generally a non-theistic religion that certainly believes in metaphysical morality, you may be familiar with the idea of karma, the idea that good intent and good deeds contribute to good karma and happier rebirths, while bad intent and bad deeds contribute to bad karma and bad rebirths. All of this without the necessity of a creator god imposing it.
Who just, follow the evidence, but they're assuming that morality exists and they can't provide any evidence for that if they're atheists. So yeah, that's the problem. That's the problem that I see with atheists. They're not honest with themselves. They say we can make up our own meaning, but that's not being honest. You should want to be honest with yourself and say, if you're an atheist and you genuinely believe that there is no God, then you should be honest with yourself and say that everything is meaningless if you're genuinely about seeking the truth.
I still don't see how you got there. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's just that you're insisting that objective meaning imposed from a creator god, is the only true meaning. Self-derived meaning can't exist because reasons. I just don't see how you got there. Even after all of this, it seems that it was just something, if there's no objective morality, then there's no morality at all, because subjectivity isn't real, therefore subjective meaning isn't real. Atheists are materialists, and I don't know what that means, so it's stupid and fake. Something, therefore God? This entire video really has the energy of someone who knows very little about the subject they're talking about and has no intention of learning about it, whinging about how it's stupid based on that ignorance. Like, this is the same energy as an anti-evolutionist braying about how if we all came from monkeys, why are there still monkeys?
Or you could actually follow the evidence and see that there is a God, there is a higher power, there is more to life than just the physical, material, objective meaning. There is a purpose to life. And you don't just make up your own meaning. You don't get to just do whatever you want. That's not how it works. And on an atheistic worldview, that's just not being honest with yourselves. So, you should be honest with yourselves.
You theists should be honest with yourselves. Because what you just said, that's not how it works, that you don't get to make up your own meaning and do whatever you want in life, that's actually exactly how it works. And theists do it too. Every theist I have ever seen, when it comes to what they're doing or should be doing with their lives, ultimately ends up doing exactly what they want to do. A girl who grew up dreaming of marrying Mr. Right and having a bunch of kids, being a stay-at-home mom, trad wife, that's exactly what she ends up doing. She just says, oh, this is what God was calling me to do. It just happens to match up exactly with what I wanted to do. Or that guy who grew up going to church several times a week and loved it there. Also loved telling people what to do and having people hang off his every word. Well, he goes into the seminary, or gets a degree in theology and becomes a pastor, something he always wanted to do and finds incredibly fulfilling. But that wasn't him deriving his own meaning in his life for himself. No, that was God's plan for him all along. And the slightly psychopathic, prone to violence person who decides to join the military goes on to see themselves as a warrior for God, going to far-off places and bombing the hell out of the heathens. Well, even though there are plenty of theists who would say that certainly isn't what God wants, love thy neighbor as thyself and all that, that soldier still is convinced that they're fulfilling God's purpose for them. Everyone comes up with their own meaning for themselves in their life. It's just that theists are dishonest about where that meaning comes from, insisting that it comes from God rather than from themselves. Hell, just earlier this week, the Southern Baptist Convention had a contentious vote on whether or not they should allow women pastors in their churches. Well, those women pastors think that God's meaning and purpose for them is to spread the gospel from the pulpit. Meanwhile, others within their same church insist that a woman's purpose can never be to preach from the pulpit. That they should be... how did that Schoolhouse Rock song put it?
Taking in sperm and spitting out baby.
Doesn't it make more sense that all of these people, that in fact all people everywhere are just making their own meaning for themselves and the God believers are just insisting that that meaning is actually coming down to them from on high? Who's actually not being honest with themselves here, Seth? The ones admitting that they're doing what they want to do because they want to do it, or the ones insisting that they're doing what they want to do because it's what their invisible friend in the sky wants them to do, not because he told them so, but because they just, feel that it's right. And that was the end of Seth's rambly rant about the dishonesty of atheists. It was a lot of general misunderstanding of the difference between objective and subjective, insisting that subjective meaning and morality can't exist, when in actuality it's objective meaning and morality that can't, by definition of the terms, exist. The old common theistic misunderstanding of atheism, that atheism is a worldview when it's not, that atheism leads to nihilism when it doesn't, and more commonly leads to feeling and experiencing more meaning in life than theists do. Misidentifying atheists as materialists, misidentifying objective morality as a uniquely theistic notion when it's not, and ultimately concluding that atheists are lying to themselves when they say that they get their meaning from themselves, when it's vastly more likely that theists are lying to themselves when they claim that their almost certainly self-derived meaning is actually the will of God and not just them doing whatever they want to do. Hell, even the little unimportant statements that Seth made that I chose to ignore, like that the universe was however many millions of years old that he said, was incorrect. This whole video is to the point where I feel it's fair to take the whole of everything Seth said and conclude that
Every word of what you just said was wrong.
And so that is where we'll end things for today. So thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe so you'll always be notified when a new video comes out. Don't forget to check out my Twitter and Patreon if you'd like to support my work directly. My Teespring if you want some Plinky merchandise. All that linked below in the description. Special shout out to my most recent super thankers here on YouTube, Salvi Mike and Joji Doobie 4. Until next time, I'm Professor Plink reminding you to keep striving for greater understanding. It's the best way to get wherever you want to go.